The job interview was the strangest I'd ever had. The hiring manager, a woman named Sarah with a sad smile, asked me only 3 questions. Could I follow instructions without asking why? Was I comfortable working alone in the dark? And did I have anyone who would immediately notice if I went missing? I should have walked out right then, but I was desperate, broke, and tired of sleeping in my car, so I answered yes, yes, and no. She slid the contract across the table and said, "Welcome to Harrow Creek Mining. You start tomorrow. And I'm sorry." Harrow Creek looked like every other dying West Virginia mining town. Shuttered shops, rusted equipment, and empty houses with sagging porches. But it felt different. The air tasted metallic, like blood mixed with coal dust. And there was a sound, constant and low, like a bell ringing somewhere far away. When I asked the motel owner about it, she went pale. "You hear it already?" she whispered. "Most don't hear it until their 3rd day." She gripped my arm so hard it bruised. When it gets loud, when you can't ignore it anymore, you run. You hear me? You run and don't look back. Her name was Betty Hatfield, and she'd lived in Harrow Creek her whole life. 73 years of watching the town hollow out, watching young people leave and desperate people arrive. People like me. She ran the Sleepy Hollow Motor Lodge, the only place still taking guests. The room smelled like cigarettes and pine sol, and the TV only got 3 channels, all static. I tried to sleep that first night, but couldn't. The bell kept ringing. Soft at first, then building, like it was moving closer. I got up and looked out the window. Main Street was empty except for a figure standing under the broken streetlight by the old Piggly Wiggly. They weren't moving, just standing there, facing the mountains. I watched for 20 minutes. They never moved. Never shifted weight or checked a phone or did anything a real person would do. Just stood there, staring at the dark ridgeline where the mine entrance sat like an open mouth. At 3 a.m., I finally fell asleep with the TV on. I dreamed about tunnels that went down forever, about hands reaching out of coal seams, about a bell the size of a house buried in the earth, swinging in darkness. When I woke up, my mouth tasted like rust, and my pillow was covered in black dust that definitely wasn't there when I went to bed. Betty was at the front desk when I came down. She had coffee ready, strong and bitter. "You look like hell," she said, not unkind, just stating fact. "First day's always rough. You'll get used to it." She paused, studying my face. "Or you won't. Most don't last a week." I asked her what she meant. She just shook her head and pushed a paper bag across the counter. "Packed you a lunch. Don't eat anything they offer you down there. And don't drink the water from the taps in the tunnels, no matter how thirsty you get." "Why not?" "Because," she said quietly, "it ain't water." The mine entrance sat 3 miles outside town, carved into the side of Copperhead Ridge. The road up was gravel and switchbacks, lined with dead trees that looked like they'd been burned from the inside out. My Ford Ranger coughed and wheezed on the quan, threatening to die with every hairpin turn. There were 6 other vehicles in the parking lot, 3 pickup trucks that had seen better decades, a Dodge Caravan with a cracked windshield, and 2 sedans that looked ready for the scrapyard. And standing beside them, waiting in the pre-dawn gray, were 5 people who all had the same expression. Empty. Like someone had scooped out everything behind their eyes and left just enough to keep them upright. A man in a yellow hard hat approached me. He was maybe 40, with a beard that hadn't been trimmed in months and hands that shook even when he held them still. His name tag said, "Dale Parsons, Safety Officer." "You the new hire?" His voice came out rough, like he'd been screaming. "Yeah, started today." He nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Yellow legal pad, the kind you'd find at any Dollar General. The writing on it was in pencil, pressed so hard into the paper that some words had torn through. "Read this. Memorize it. Don't lose it." He pressed the paper into my palm. "And whatever you do, don't think you're smarter than the rules. You ain't." I unfolded the paper. 7 rules, numbered and underlined. If you hear the bell ringing, count the chimes. If it rings more than 7 times, find the nearest painted white line and stand on it until the ringing stops. The drinking fountains on level 3 run clear. Do not drink from them. The water on level 5 runs brown. Drink only from these. If you see another worker standing completely still, do not approach them. Mark the location and report it to Dale at shift end. Your headlamp will flicker. This is normal. If it goes out completely, stay where you are and count to 60 before moving. Sometimes you will hear voices calling your name from deeper tunnels. These are not your co-workers. Do not answer. Do not investigate. If you find a lunch pail that isn't yours, leave it where it is. Do not open it. Do not move it. The bell rings at 3:33 a.m. every night. You will hear it even when you're not in the mine. This is normal. If it rings at any other time, refer to Rule 1. I read through them twice, trying to find the joke. Some kind of prank they played on new guys. But when I looked up, Dale wasn't smiling. None of them were. "This is serious?" I asked. "You'll find out." He turned and started walking toward the entrance. "Shift starts in 10 minutes. You're with me and Lloyd today. We're checking the support beams on level 4. Lloyd turned out to be the youngest of the group, maybe 25, with the kind of thin frame that comes from not eating enough. His last name was McCoy, another old West Virginia name that probably went back generations. He didn't talk much, just handed me a hard hat, a headlamp, and a respirator that smelled like someone else's breath. "Battery pack goes on your belt," he said quietly. "Keep your light pointed down unless you need to look up. Don't shine it in anyone's face." "Why not?" He glanced at Dale, who was signing us in on the clipboard attached to the mine entrance. "Sometimes it ain't a face anymore." Before I could ask what that meant, Dale waved us over. The mine entrance was reinforced with new concrete, but beneath it you could see the original stonework from the 1940s. Someone had spray-painted a cross above the door. Multiple coats, like they kept adding layers whenever the paint wore thin. "Stay close," Dale said as we entered. "Don't wander off. Don't touch anything that looks wet. And if you feel tired, really tired, like you could just lay down and sleep forever, you tell me right away. Understand?" I nodded. The tunnel sloped down into darkness, and the air changed immediately. Colder, heavier. That metallic taste grew stronger, coating my tongue and throat. And underneath everything else, so faint I almost missed it, was the smell of something rotting. We descended into the earth, our headlamps cutting thin beams through the dark. Behind us, daylight became a distant memory, then disappeared entirely. And somewhere deep below, I could swear I heard it. The bell, ringing softly, like it was welcoming me home. Level 4 was colder than the upper tunnels. Our breath came out in clouds that hung in the stale air, barely moving. The support beams we were checking dated back to the original operation. Thick posts of wood that had spent 70 years holding up thousands of tons of rock and earth. Dale ran his hands along each one, checking for cracks, for give, for any sign they might fail. "Most of these should have been replaced 20 years ago," he muttered. His headlamp swept across the tunnel walls, revealing seams of coal that gleamed dully in the light. "But the company says they're fine. Company says a lot of things." Lloyd worked silently beside him, making notes on a clipboard. Every few minutes he'd glance over his shoulder at the darkness behind us, like he expected something to be standing there. The third time he did it, I looked too. Nothing but empty tunnels stretching back toward the shaft entrance. "Don't do that," Lloyd said quietly. "Looking back just makes it worse." "Makes what worse?" He didn't answer, just went back to his clipboard, writing numbers that probably meant something to someone who knew what they were looking at. We worked for 2 hours, moving deeper into the network of tunnels. The bell sound grew louder the further down we went, though neither Dale nor Lloyd seemed to notice it. It had rhythm now, a pattern I couldn't quite figure out. 7 rings, pause. 7 rings, pause. Over and over, like a heartbeat made of brass. Around 9 in the morning, Dale called for a break. We sat on empty equipment crates someone had left against the tunnel wall, drinking water from our thermoses. Dale pulled out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Lloyd didn't eat anything, just stared at the ground between his boots. "You hear it yet?" Dale asked me, not looking up from his sandwich. "The bell? Yeah, since last night." He nodded. "Started early for you. Took me 4 days. Lloyd here didn't hear it until his 2nd week." He took a bite, chewed slowly. "Means you're sensitive. Means you'll see things sooner too." "See what things?" "The things that don't leave," Lloyd said softly. He was still staring at the ground. "The ones who couldn't stop listening." Before I could ask what he meant, my headlamp flickered. Once, twice, then went completely dark. The darkness in a mine isn't like darkness anywhere else. It's absolute, total. The kind of black that presses against your eyes and makes you forget what seeing ever felt like. I could hear Dale and Lloyd breathing beside me, but I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. Rule 4. If your headlamp goes out completely, stay where you are and count to 60 before moving. I started counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At 15, I heard footsteps. Not from Dale or Lloyd, who were sitting perfectly still beside me. These came from deeper in the tunnel, from the direction we'd been heading. Slow steps, deliberate, the kind of pace someone uses when they're in no hurry, when they know exactly where they're going and what they'll find when they get there. 23 Mississippi, 24 Mississippi. The footsteps grew closer. With them came a smell I recognized from my first night at the motel. Rust and rot, and something else. Something organic that had been underground too long. My heart was doing painful things in my chest, but I kept counting, kept sitting still. 37 Mississippi, 38 Mississippi. The footsteps stopped. Right in front of me. Close enough that I should have felt breath on my face if the thing standing there still breathed. The air grew colder, so cold that moisture beaded on my skin and froze there. I wanted to move. Wanted to run. Wanted to do anything except sit in the dark with something inches away from me that I couldn't see. 52 Mississippi, 53 Mississippi. Something touched my shoulder. Not a hand. Too many fingers. Too many joints. Moving like spider legs trying to find purchase. I bit down on my tongue hard enough to taste blood, but I didn't move. Didn't scream. Just kept counting. 59 Mississippi. 60. My headlamp came back on, bright and steady. The tunnel was empty. Dale and Lloyd sat beside me, their lights also back on, their faces carefully blank. But Lloyd's hands were shaking so badly, he had to tuck them under his arms. "Good," Dale said after a moment. "You followed the rule. Most people don't. Most people run." He stood up, brushing coal dust off his pants. "The ones who run don't come back up." My shoulders still felt cold where the thing had touched me. I didn't want to look at it, didn't want to see if there were marks. But I couldn't help myself. I pulled my collar aside. 5 dark spots, perfectly round, arranged in a pattern that almost looked like fingertips. Except there were 7 of them instead of 5. and they were sunk into my skin like someone had pressed hard enough to leave permanent impressions. "That'll fade," Dale said, not sounding entirely convinced. "Usually does." "Mostly." We went back to work, checking more support beams, moving through tunnels that all looked the same. Every shadow seemed deeper now. Every sound echoed in ways, and the bell kept ringing, constant and rhythmic, like it was counting down to something. Around noon, we reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. Someone had painted white lines on the floor here, thick stripes that formed a circle about 6 feet across. Inside the circle were dark stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood. Lloyd gave it a wide berth, refusing to even look at it directly. "What's that for?" I asked. "Rule 1, Dale said. If the bell rings more than 7 times, you stand here, inside the circle. Don't matter where you are in the mine, you get to a white line, and you stay there until it stops. What happens if you don't?" Dale's jaw tightened. He pointed his headlamp down a side tunnel, one we weren't scheduled to check. "See for yourself." 20 feet down the tunnel, something was standing against the wall. It might have been a person once. It had the right general shape, the right approximate height. But it was wrong in ways my brain struggled to process. Its limbs bent at places where there shouldn't have been joints. Its head tilted at an angle that would have broken a living person's neck. And it was perfectly, completely still. Rule 3. If you see another worker standing completely still, do not approach them. "How long has he been there?" I whispered. "Since before I started," Dale said. "Been there at least 3 years, maybe longer. He's on the list, number 47. "The list?" "Of people who didn't follow the rules." Dale turned away from the figure. "Company keeps track. Says it's for safety records. But we all know what it really is. It's a head count, a reminder of how many the mine's already taken." If you like the stories, please hype the videos from a button like this just above the comment section. It helps the videos to get more reach and perform well. It would take just a few seconds and cost nothing, but would help the channel grow even faster. Thank you. We moved on, leaving the thing that used to be a person standing in the dark. But I could feel it watching us leave, could sense something behind those empty eyes tracking our movement. And I wondered how long it would be before someone found me standing in some forgotten tunnel, bent wrong and frozen forever. Just another number on the company's list. Dale and Lloyd sat against the tunnel wall, separated by about 10 feet of space, each in their own pool of headlamp light. I realized I'd never seen them sit close together. Never seen them make casual conversation like normal co-workers would. I pulled out the paper bag Betty had packed, a ham sandwich on white bread, a bag of Utz chips, and a Coke that had gone warm. Simple food that tasted like the best meal I'd ever had after hours breathing coal dust and fear. Lloyd wasn't eating again, just staring at something in his hands. When my light caught it, I saw what looked like a photograph, edges worn soft from constant handling. A woman and a little girl, both smiling in front of a Christmas tree. "Your family?" I asked. He looked up, surprised, like he'd forgotten I was there. "Was. Wife took my daughter and left 6 months ago. Said she couldn't watch me disappear a little more every day." He tucked the photo back in his pocket. "She wasn't wrong. I can feel it happening. Pieces of me going missing. Sometimes I forget my daughter's middle name. Sometimes I can't remember what my wife's laugh sounded like." "Why don't you quit?" "Can't." His voice was flat. "Company's got clauses in the contract. You try to leave before your year is up, they sue for damages. Most of us signed because we were broke. Now we're trapped." He looked at me directly for the first time all day. "How long did they give you?" I thought back to the contract. the one I'd barely read before signing. 12 months. Same as everyone, 12 months in the mine or financial ruin. He pulled out his water bottle, took a long drink. Nobody's made it the full year yet, not since they reopened this section 3 years ago. Dale cleared his throat, a warning sound. Lloyd went quiet, but the damage was done. My appetite vanished. I wrapped up the rest of my sandwich and shoved it back in the bag. "We need to check level 5 before shift ends," Dale said, standing up. "Water quality test. Monthly requirement." Level 5 was deeper than I'd expected. The descent took 20 minutes, following a shaft that spiraled down through layers of rock and coal. The temperature dropped with every step. By the time we reached the bottom, I could see frost forming on the exposed pipes that ran along the ceiling. The drinking fountain was in an alcove carved into the tunnel wall. Someone had mounted a mirror above it, cracked and spotted with age. The water ran continuously from the tap, a thin stream that splashed into the basin below. And it was brown, exactly like the rules said. Not muddy brown, rust brown, blood brown. "Take a sample," Dale said, handing me a plastic bottle. "We send it to the company lab every month. They always say it's fine. We drink it anyway." I held the bottle under the stream. The water was cold enough to hurt my fingers, and it had a smell like old pennies left in the rain. When the bottle was full, I capped it and set it aside. That's when I saw the writing on the mirror, scratched into the glass with something sharp, probably a knife or a nail. Letters 2 inches tall, crude but readable. "They're still alive down here. We're all still alive. Please help us." Below it, someone else had written, "Don't listen. They're not people anymore." And below that, in fresher scratches that looked recent, "The bell is hungry. The bell is always hungry." "Don't read the mirror messages," Dale said, but his voice lacked conviction. "They'll mess with your head." "Who writes them?" "Workers who've been here too long, or things pretending to be workers. Hard to tell the difference anymore." He checked his watch, a battered Timex with a cracked face. "We need to move. Still got 2 more levels to check." But before we could leave, I heard it. My name, spoken clearly from somewhere deeper in level 5. A woman's voice, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. It sounded like my mother, who died when I was 17, who I hadn't heard speak in 8 years. "Tommy? Tommy, honey, where are you? I need help, please. I'm lost down here." Rule 5. Sometimes you will hear voices calling your name from deeper tunnels. These are not your co-workers. Do not answer. Do not investigate. But it sounded so much like her. The exact pitch and tone, the way she used to call me when I was late for dinner. My feet started moving before my brain caught up, carrying me toward the voice. Dale grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "Don't!" "That's my mother. She needs help." "That's not your mother. Your mother's dead, and whatever's using her voice wants you to think it needs help. It doesn't. It just wants you deeper in the tunnels where we can't follow." The voice came again, more desperate now. "Tell me, please. It's so dark down here. I'm scared. Don't leave me alone." Every instinct I had screamed at me to go to her, to help, to at least answer so she'd know I heard her. But Dale's grip on my arm kept me anchored to reality. Lloyd had moved closer too, putting himself between me and the deeper tunnel. "Close your eyes," Lloyd said quietly. "Count to 30. It'll pass. It always passes." I closed my eyes and counted. The voice kept calling, kept begging, kept using my mother's words and inflections. At 15, it changed, became angry, bitter, started saying things my mother would never have said, horrible accusations and threats. At 23, it wasn't my mother's voice anymore. It was something else, something trying to sound human, but failing. The words came out wrong, syllables stretched and distorted, multiple tones overlapping like several people speaking at once. At 30, it stopped. When I opened my eyes, the tunnel ahead was empty and silent. "Good," Dale said, releasing my arm. "You're learning." My hands were shaking. I shoved them in my pockets so they wouldn't see. Does it always know the right voice to use? Always. It gets in your head somehow, finds the person you miss most. Last month it used Lloyd's daughter's voice. Month before that, it was my brother who died in Iraq. Dale started walking back toward the shaft. Company says it's acoustic phenomena, air pressure and echoes creating auditory hallucinations. But we all know better. We climbed back up to level 4 in silence. The bell was ringing louder now, more insistent. I counted the chimes without thinking about it. Always 7. Never more, never less. Always that same rhythm that seemed to sync up with my heartbeat. As we reached the junction with the white circle, I saw something. A lunch pail sitting right in the middle of the painted lines. Old-style metal, the kind my grandfather used to carry. It looked brand new, no rust or dents, like someone had just set it down moments ago. Rule 6. If you find a lunch pail that isn't yours, leave it where it is. Do not open it. Do not move it. "Dale," I said, pointing. He looked at the lunch pail and went pale. "That wasn't there an hour ago. I checked this junction myself. Should we report it?" "To who? The company?" Dale laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They're the ones putting them there. Testing us. Seeing who's dumb enough to look inside." "What's in them?" Lloyd shook his head. "Nobody who's looked has been able to say. They just start screaming and don't stop. Had a guy 2 months ago, Tommy Adkins from Beckley, found a lunch pail on level 3. Opened it up, and his mind just broke. They had to drag him out. Last I heard, he was at Sharp Hospital in Weston. Psychiatric ward. Still screaming. We gave the lunch pail a wide berth, but I couldn't stop looking at it. Couldn't stop wondering what was inside, what could possibly break someone that completely. And as we walked away, I swear I heard something moving inside it. Something wet and wrong, scraping against the metal, trying to get out. The bell rang 7 times. Then, after a pause that felt like the mine itself was holding its breath, it rang an 8th time. The 8th chime echoed through the tunnels like a death knell. Dale's face went white in the beam of his headlamp. "Move! Now!" He was already running toward the white circle, the one with the dark stains inside. Lloyd and I followed, our boots pounding against the rock floor, sending up clouds of coal dust that choked our lungs. We reached the circle and jumped inside just as the 9th chime rang out. Then the 10th, the 11th. "Don't move," Dale hissed. "Don't step outside the lines. Don't speak. Don't even breathe loud." The 12th chime, the 13th. The temperature plummeted. Frost spread across the tunnel walls in crystalline patterns, moving fast like time-lapse footage. Our breath came out in white plumes that hung frozen in the air. And something was coming up from the deeper levels. I could hear it. Not footsteps this time. More like a dragging sound, wet and heavy, accompanied by a clicking that reminded me of crabs scuttling across rocks. The 14th chime. The 15th. It appeared at the edge of our light. At first I thought it was multiple people walking together, but as it came closer I realized it was one thing. One massive thing made from pieces of people who'd been in the mine too long. Arms and legs jutted out at wrong angles, some still wearing work gloves and steel-toed boots. Faces pressed out from its center mass, mouths open in silent screams, eyes clouded and distant. The 16th chime. The 17th. The thing circled our white circle slowly, those faces turning to watch us as it moved. I recognized one of them. the stillness in his features, the particular angle of his head. Number 47 from the side tunnel. He'd been absorbed into this, whatever this was, and he was still aware. His eyes tracked me with recognition and something that might have been pleading. The 18th chime. The 19th. Lloyd was crying silently beside me, tears freezing on his cheeks. Dale had his eyes closed, lips moving in what might have been prayer, or might have been counting. I kept my eyes on the thing circling us, watching as more details emerged from the darkness. At least 30 people had been folded into its mass. Some looked recent, their skin still holding color. Others were older, nothing but bones held together by something black and viscous that dripped onto the tunnel floor. The 20th chime. The thing stopped, directly in front of me. One of the faces pushed forward, stretching the black substance that bound it to the mass. The mouth opened wider than any human mouth should, and a voice came out. Not one voice, many voices, all speaking at once in a chorus of agony. Join us, join us. The bell is calling. The bell is hungry. Join us. The 21st chime. We were like you. We followed the rules. We thought we'd survive. But the rules just delay the inevitable. Everyone joins eventually. Everyone becomes part of the bell's choir. My feet wanted to move, wanted to step out of the circle and run, but I forced them to stay planted. Forced myself to remember that the white line was the only thing keeping us from being pulled into that mass of bodies and bones and screaming faces. The 22nd chime. One of the arms reached toward us, fingers stretching and lengthening like taffy, reaching across the white line. The tips of those fingers smoked when they crossed the painted boundary, like holy water on cursed flesh. But they kept coming, kept reaching. Dale opened his eyes. Don't let it touch you. If it touches you outside the circle, you're gone. The 23rd chime. The fingers were inches from my face now, close enough that I could see they weren't quite fingers anymore. The nails had grown into long black talons. The skin had split in places, revealing bone that looked more like coal than calcium. And they were cold. So cold that the air around them froze solid, forming tiny ice crystals that drifted down like snow. The 24th chime. Then silence. The bell stopped ringing. For a moment, nothing happened. The thing stood there, its many faces watching us, that elongated arm still reaching. Then, like someone had cut its strings, it collapsed. The bodies and bones that made up its mass separated, falling to the tunnel floor in a heap of limbs and torsos and hollow skulls. The black substance that had held it together evaporated into smoke that smelled like burning rubber and spoiled meat. We waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. Okay, Dale said finally. It's over. We can move. We stepped out of the circle carefully, like the floor might give way beneath us. The pile of bodies remained where they'd fallen, but they looked different now. Less real. More like stage props or wax figures. When I got closer, I saw they were fading, becoming translucent, until they vanished entirely, leaving nothing but dark stains on the rock floor. What was that? My voice came out hoarse. The bell's collector, Dale said. He was shaking, adrenaline or fear or both. When it rings more than 7 times, that thing comes up from the deep sections. It takes whoever it can find. The white lines are the only protection. They're painted with something special. Ground limestone mixed with salt and bone meal. Old miner's trick from before the company took over. Lloyd had sat down on the tunnel floor, his head between his knees. That's the 3rd time this month. It's getting more frequent. Used to be once every few weeks. Now it's every few days. Why is it getting worse? Because the mine is hungry, Dale said. Always has been. The original operation shut down in 1952 after the disaster. Cave-in killed 47 men on the night shift. Took 3 weeks to recover the bodies. Some they never found. Company sealed the deep sections and walked away. Nobody touched this place for 60 years. He sat down beside Lloyd, suddenly looking much older than 40. Then Harrow Creek Mining Corporation bought the land. New owners, new money, new technology. They said they could safely extract the remaining coal deposits. They reopened the sealed sections, and they found something down there. Something that had been trapped for 6 decades. Something that had been feeding on the miners who died in the collapse. "The bell," I said. "The bell. Nobody knows what it is. Some kind of entity, some kind of phenomenon. It rings because that's the only way it can communicate. And every person who hears it, every person who stays in the mine long enough, becomes part of it. Becomes food for whatever's down there in the darkness." I thought about the contract I'd signed, the 12 months I'd committed to. There has to be a way out. A way to break the contract. "There is," Lloyd said quietly. "Death. That's the only way out. Die before the mine takes you. At least you go on your own terms." He looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much. That's what my wife wanted me to understand. She wanted me to quit even if it meant losing everything. Because at least I'd still be me. At least I'd still remember her name, our daughter's birthday, the sound of her laugh. We sat there in the cold tunnel, surrounded by dark stains where bodies had vanished, listening to the ordinary sounds of the mine. Distant dripping water, the creak of old timbers, the whisper of air moving through passages that went down forever. Then from the deeper tunnels, I heard it again. That voice, not my mother's this time. My own voice, calling out to me from the darkness. "Help me. I'm stuck down here. I can't find my way back. Please. Someone help me." It was my voice, but saying things I'd never said, expressing fear I hadn't felt yet. It was my future self, calling from some deeper level where I'd eventually end up. Lost and alone and begging for help that would never come. Dale stood up slowly. "Shift ends in 2 hours. We need to finish the inspection and get topside before dark. The mine is worse at night. The bell rings stronger. The things that hunt become bolder." We made our way back through the tunnels, past the still workers standing in their eternal vigil, past the lunch pails that kept appearing in new locations, past the drinking fountains that ran clear and brown and sometimes red. And all the while, that voice kept calling. My voice, promising me that I was already lost, already part of the mine, already belonging to the bell. By the time we reached the surface, the sun was setting behind Copperhead Ridge, painting the dead trees in shades of orange and crimson. The parking lot looked the same as it had that morning, but somehow different too. Like returning to a place you thought you knew, only to find all the details slightly wrong. Dale clocked us out on his clipboard. "Tomorrow, same time. We're checking level 6. It's worse down there. Bring extra batteries for your lamp, and maybe say your goodbyes tonight just in case." I drove back to the Sleepy Hollow Motor Lodge in silence, my hands tight on the steering wheel. The marks on my shoulder ached, those 7 impressions that weren't quite fingerprints, and in the rearview mirror, just for a moment, I thought I saw someone sitting in my back seat. Someone with my face, looking at me with hollow eyes, mouthing words I couldn't hear, but somehow understood. "Welcome home. You were always meant to be here. The bell has been waiting for you. Betty had dinner waiting when I got back to the motel. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans that came from a can but tasted better than they had any right to. She set it on the small table in my room without asking if I wanted it. 'You need to eat,' she said. 'Body can't fight what's happening to you on an empty stomach.' I hadn't realized how hungry I was until the food was in front of me. I ate like someone who'd been starving for weeks, barely tasting it, just shoveling it in. Betty sat in the room's only chair, watching me with those sad eyes that seemed to see right through me. "You saw something today," she said. Not a question. The collector. That's what Dale called it. 24 chimes and this thing came up from the deep sections, made of people. Faces I recognized. Betty nodded slowly. "My husband's in there. Been part of it for 15 years now. I see him sometimes when I dream. He's trying to tell me something, but the words come out wrong, all jumbled up with the other voices. Why do you stay here? Why not leave Harrow Creek? Can't. Not while he's still down there, still trapped in that thing. Not while there's even a chance he might come back." She stood up, moved to the window, looked out at the darkening mountains. "When the company reopened the mine, I thought maybe it would be different. New equipment, new safety procedures. But it's the same as it always was. The mine takes and never gives anything back. Dale said the bell is some kind of entity, something that was trapped when they sealed the deep sections in 1952. The bell was here long before that." Betty turned to face me. "My grandmother told me stories her grandmother told her. The bell's been ringing in these mountains since before white folks settled here. Cherokee used to avoid this valley. Called it the hungry place. Said there was a spirit trapped in the earth, something that ate loneliness and despair and turned people into echoes of themselves." She came back to the table, sat down across from me. "The first mining operation started in 1903. Within 6 months, they had 20 men go missing. Not dead in accidents, just gone. Vanished down in the deep tunnels. They'd send search parties, but the parties would come back different. Quieter, more hollow, and they'd all hear the bell. Then why does the company keep operating? Why keep sending people down there? Because the coal they bring up is perfect. No impurities, no slag. It burns hotter and cleaner than any coal ever mined in West Virginia. Fetches 3 times the normal price. The company makes millions while feeding the mine the one thing it really wants. People. Fresh meat for the collector. Fresh voices for the bell's choir. I pushed my plate away. Appetite gone. There has to be a way to stop it. To break whatever's down there. Maybe." Betty reached into her pocket and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a group of miners standing outside the mine entrance, dated 1951. 47 men, all grinning at the camera, despite the coal dust on their faces. These are the men who died in the collapse. My husband's grandfather is in this picture, 3rd from the left. I looked at the man she pointed to. Young, maybe 25, with the Hatfield family resemblance clear in his features. What happened to them? The company said it was a structural failure. Support beams gave way, and half of Level 7 came down on the night shift. But my husband's grandfather left letters, hid them in the walls of this motel before he went down for his last shift. He knew something was wrong. Knew the mine was changing, becoming something alive and aware. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, the handwriting shaky and rushed. He wrote that the bell was getting louder every day, that it had learned to mimic voices, to call men deeper into the tunnels, where they'd never be found. He wrote that some of the miners had started changing, that they'd work their shifts with strange smiles, like they were hearing music nobody else could hear. I read the letter, my hands shaking. The last paragraph was underlined 3 times. "If anyone finds this, know that we tried to stop it. Tried to destroy the bell. We planted charges in the deep sections, enough dynamite to bring down half the mountain. But the bell knew. It rang 47 times on November 12th, and we all went down into the earth like sleepwalkers. By the time we understood what was happening, it was too late. The charges went off, but they didn't destroy anything. They just sealed us in with it. 47 voices for the bell's choir. God forgive us. God forgive me. They tried to kill it, I said, and it turned them into weapons against themselves. The bell feeds on isolation, Betty said, on loneliness and despair. Every person who goes down there alone, who hears it calling, becomes part of its meal. But those 47 men went down together. They were connected. They cared about each other. That's what the bell couldn't digest. That's why they're still aware, still trapped in the collector instead of fully absorbed. An idea was forming in my mind. A terrible, desperate idea. What if we didn't go down alone? What if all the workers went down together, connected, refusing to let the bell isolate us? Betty stared at me for a long moment. Then a smile spread across her face, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. You might be crazier than I thought. Or you might be the first person in 70 years who actually understands what needs to happen. We talked for hours, making plans, discussing how to convince the other workers. By the time Betty left, it was past midnight. I lay in bed, knowing I wouldn't sleep, listening to the sounds of the old motel settling, and waiting, because I knew what was coming at 3:33. At 3:15, I got up and made coffee in the little pot by the sink, sat at the table with the TV on, some late-night infomercial selling kitchen knives. The volume was turned low, but it helped fill the silence. At 3:32, the TV went to static. At 3:33, the bell rang. It was louder than it had been in the mine, clearer, like the bell was right outside my window, or maybe inside my head. 7 slow chimes that seemed to resonate in my chest, in my bones, in the deepest parts of my brain. Rule 7. The bell rings at 3:33 a.m. every night. You will hear it even when you're not in the mine. This is normal. But knowing it was normal didn't make it less terrifying. With each chime, the room grew colder. Frost formed on the inside of the windows. My breath came out in clouds, and in the static on the TV screen, I saw shapes moving, faces pressing against the glass from inside, trying to push through into the real world. One of them was mine, the same version I'd seen in the rearview mirror. It pressed its face against the screen, mouth moving, saying words I could almost hear beneath the static hiss. Come back down. Come back home. We're waiting for you. We've always been waiting. The 7th chime faded. The static cleared. The faces disappeared. The room warmed back to its normal temperature, though the frost on the windows remained, forming patterns that looked disturbingly like hands reaching upward. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent the hours until dawn reading everything I could find about Harrow Creek online. Old newspaper articles about the 1952 disaster. Historical Society records about the Cherokee legends. Geological surveys that mentioned unusual acoustic properties in the limestone caves beneath the valley. And one thing kept appearing across all the sources. One detail that nobody seemed to find significant, but that stood out to me like a beacon. Every major incident at the mine happened when workers were isolated from each other. Every disappearance, every strange death, every case of someone losing their mind. They all happened to people who were alone when the bell rang. But the 47 men in 1952? They'd been together. All on the same shift, all working in connected areas of Level 7. The bell had to take them all at once, and even then, it couldn't fully digest them. They remained aware, trapped in the collector, still themselves in some horrible way. That was the key. The bell's power came from isolation, from making each person think they were alone against something vast and hungry. But if we went down together, if we stayed connected, if we refused to let it separate us, maybe we could starve it instead. At dawn, I called Dale. He answered on the 4th ring, voice heavy with exhaustion. What? I need to talk to you and Lloyd before shift. All the workers, actually. Everyone who's still got enough of themselves left to listen. What are you talking about? I think I know how to kill it. The bell, the collector, all of it. But I can't do it alone. None of us can. That's the whole point. There was a long pause. Then, you know they'll fire us. Breach of contract. Financial ruin. Would you rather be financially ruined or end up as part of that thing we saw yesterday? Another face in the collector, screaming for help that never comes. Another pause. Longer this time. Finally. Parking lot, 6 a.m. I'll get the others. I hung up and looked out the window. The sun was rising over Copperhead Ridge, painting the dead trees gold and red. Beautiful, if you didn't know what those trees had died from. If you didn't know about the poison seeping up from the mine, the spiritual corruption that had turned an entire valley into a feeding ground. Betty knocked on my door at 5:30. She had coffee in a thermos and a look of fierce determination I hadn't seen before. My husband's mother wants to come, she said. So does Dale's sister and Lloyd's ex-wife. We've been talking. All the families of people who've been taken. We want to help. We want to be there when you go down. It's going to be dangerous. If this doesn't work. If it doesn't work, we're no worse off than we already are. But if it does... Her voice broke. If it does, maybe we can bring them back. Maybe we can free everyone the mine has taken. We drove to the mine together in Betty's old Buick, following the winding road up Copperhead Ridge as the sun climbed higher. By the time we reached the parking lot, there were already a dozen people waiting. Dale and Lloyd, the other workers from yesterday, and more I didn't recognize. People who'd worked at the mine and somehow survived their contracts. People who'd lost family members to the deep sections. People who'd been listening to the bell for years, waiting for someone to finally say enough. We stood there in the growing light, looking at the mine entrance with its spray-painted crosses and concrete reinforcements. Looking at the mouth that had swallowed so many and given back only shells and echoes. Okay, I said. Here's what we're going to do. We gathered in a circle in the parking lot. 23 people who'd all been touched by the mine, in one way or another. Dale stood beside me, Lloyd on the other side. Betty held the hand of an older woman who introduced herself as Margaret Parsons, Dale's mother. Lloyd's ex-wife, Jennifer, stood with their daughter clutching her leg, a girl maybe 5 years old with Lloyd's eyes. The bell feeds on isolation, I began. Every story, every incident, every person who's been taken happened when they were alone. But the 47 miners in 1952 went down together. They're still aware because the bell couldn't fully absorb them. Their connection to each other kept them from being completely digested. So we go down together, Dale said. Stay connected. Don't let it separate us. More than that. We bring the one thing the bell can't feed on. Hope. Human connection. Love for the people we've lost. I looked at Jennifer and her daughter. That's why the families need to be part of this. The bell has been eating despair and loneliness for over a century. We're going to give it the opposite. We're going to force it to choke. A man in his 50s stepped forward. He had burned scars on his arms and the look of someone who'd worked hard labor his entire life. Name's Wayne Runyon. Lost my son to the mine last year. He was doing a solo inspection on level 6 when he disappeared. If there's even a chance this works, I'm in. Others spoke up. A woman named Patty Lester, whose brother had been absorbed into the collector 3 months ago. A young guy named Billy Keene, who'd survived his contract, but left pieces of himself behind. Each of them had a story. Each of them had been wounded by the mine's hunger. We need supplies, Betty said. Salt, limestone powder, anything that can be used to mark protective circles if things go wrong. And rope. Lots of rope. We stay physically connected if we have to. Lloyd pulled out his pickup's tailgate and started organizing. People went to their cars and trucks, bringing back everything they could find. Rock salt from someone's garage. Climbing rope from a sporting goods store in Charleston. Flashlights and batteries and first aid kits. Even a portable speaker someone had bought at the Walmart 2 towns over. "What's the speaker for?" Dale asked. "Music," I said. "The bell uses sound to isolate us, to fill our heads with its ringing until we can't think straight. We counter with different sounds, songs we know, voices we trust, things that remind us we're human and we're together." Jennifer was putting together a playlist on her phone, asking people for song requests. Someone wanted "Take Me Home," "Country Roads." Someone else requested "Amazing Grace." Lloyd asked for his daughter's favorite song, some cartoon theme I didn't recognize, but that made the little girls smile. By 7 in the morning, we were as ready as we'd ever be. Dale had called the company, told them we were doing an emergency safety inspection on the deep sections. The supervisor on the phone said they'd be fired, sued, destroyed financially. Dale said that was fine. They could send the paperwork to whatever was left of us. We approached the mine entrance together, walking in a group rather than a line. The spray-painted crosses above the door seemed brighter in the morning sun, or maybe I was just paying more attention. Wayne Runyon reached up and touched one as he passed beneath it, whispering something too quiet to hear. The tunnel swallowed us. 23 people with headlamps and flashlights, holding hands or gripping rope, staying so close we kept bumping into each other. And that was good. That was the point. We needed to feel each other's presence, to know we weren't alone in the dark. The mine reacted immediately. The temperature dropped fast enough that our breath turned to fog within 30 feet of the entrance. The walls began to sweat, moisture running down in streams that pooled on the floor. And the bell started ringing, not its usual pattern. Fast, frantic chimes that overlapped and echoed until the sound became almost solid, pressing against our ears. "Don't listen to it," Betty shouted. "Focus on each other. Focus on why we're here." Jennifer started playing the music. Country Roads filled the tunnel, tinny and distorted through the small speaker, but real. Human. Voices singing about mountains and rivers and home. Some of us sang along, our voices rough and off-key but genuine. The bell's ringing continued, but it felt less oppressive, less absolute. We descended to level 3. The drinking fountains were running, both of them, clear and brown water mixing together in violation of the rules. Steam rose from where they met, and the smell made several people gag. But we kept moving, kept singing, kept holding tight to each other. On level 4, we found the still workers. Not just number 47, dozens of them, arranged in a corridor that led to the deeper sections. They'd been positioned like warning signs, bodies bent and twisted to spell out a message we couldn't quite read, but understood instinctively. Turn back, go no further. This is where hope ends. Lloyd's daughter started crying. Jennifer picked her up, held her close. "Don't look at them, baby. Look at me. Just look at Mama." But I made myself look. Made myself study each face, each frozen expression of terror and realization. These were the people who'd gone down alone, who'd tried to survive the mine through obedience rather than resistance. And the mine had taken them anyway, because that's what it did. It took and never stopped taking. "They're still in there," I said quietly. "Still aware. We're going to free them." Wayne Runyon stepped forward and did something I didn't expect. He hugged one of the still workers, wrapped his arms around the frozen figure and held tight. "I'm here, Danny. Your old man's here. I'm going to bring you home." The figure's eyes moved. just a fraction, just enough to show something still lived behind them. And from its mouth came a sound, not quite words, more like a groan of recognition. We kept moving, past the white circles and dark stains, past the lunch pails that kept appearing in our path. Billy Keene kicked one aside, and instead of consequences, we heard something like a shriek echo from deeper in the mine, the sound of something surprised, something frustrated. "It's working," Dale said. "The mine doesn't know what to do with us." Level 5 was worse. The walls were moving, not physically but in ways that hurt to look at. They rippled like water, and faces kept pressing through from behind, mouths open in silent screams. The brown water fountain was spraying now, coating the floor in rust-colored liquid that steamed and hissed where it landed. But we had 23 people sharing 23 lights, and there were no shadows big enough to hide in. The faces in the walls retreated. The water fountain sputtered and died. At the junction between level 5 and level 6, we found writing on the walls. Fresh, still dripping. Written in something dark and viscous that might have been oil or blood or something worse. The same message repeated over and over. "You cannot save them. You will join them. The bell is eternal. The hunger never ends." Margaret Parsons stepped up to the wall and wiped away part of the message with her bare hand. Where she touched, the stone underneath was clean, unmarked. "My boy is down here somewhere," she said. "Has been for 15 years. Whatever you are, whatever you think you are, you don't get to keep him. You don't get to keep any of them." She turned to face the group, her hand still dripping with that dark substance. "My son was a good man. Worked hard, loved his family, never hurt nobody. This place took him and tried to make him into something else. But I remember who he really was, and I'm not letting this mine have the last word on his life." Others stepped forward, adding their own defiance. Patty Lester wrote her brother's name on the wall in chalk. Wayne Runyon tied a photo of his son to a support beam. Jennifer had her daughter draw a picture, stick figures of their family with a sun overhead, and taped it where the dark writing had been thickest. Acts of love in a place that fed on despair. Memories and connections in a space designed for isolation. And with each small gesture, the mind seemed to recoil, seemed to pull back from us like we were poison it couldn't digest. The bell changed its pattern. No longer the steady 7 chimes or the warning of more. Now it was ringing constantly, a desperate cacophony that had no rhythm, no structure, just noise, trying to drown out our music, our voices, our human sounds of connection and hope. We reached the shaft that led to level 6, the deepest section of the mine where the original disaster had happened, where 47 men had been sealed in with the bell 70 years ago, where everything had started. The shaft entrance was marked with police tape, yellow and faded, warning signs in multiple languages about unstable structures and toxic atmosphere. But the tape had been cut recently, hanging in strips, and there were footprints in the coal dust, leading down. Fresh footprints, human prints. "Someone else is down there," Lloyd said. Dale checked the work logs on his phone, scrolling through the schedule. His face went pale. Oh, God. There was a maintenance worker scheduled for level 6 this morning. Emergency pump repair. His name is Tommy Adkins. The same Tommy Adkins from Beckley who'd opened the lunch pail 2 months ago. The one they'd taken to Sharp Hospital, still screaming. He'd come back, or the mine had brought him back. "It's a trap," Billy Keene said. "Has to be. The mine is using him as bait." "Probably," I agreed. "But we're going down anyway. Because that's what it can't understand. That we'd walk into a trap to save someone. That we'd risk everything for a person we don't even know." We started down the shaft to level 6, all 23 of us, connected by rope and hope and stubborn human refusal to let the darkness win. and as we descended, the bell's ringing grew louder, more furious, more desperate. It knew what we were trying to do, and it knew, maybe for the first time in its long, hungry existence, that it might actually lose. Level 6 was different from the upper sections. The walls here weren't reinforced with concrete or steel beams. They were raw rock, ancient limestone carved with symbols that predated any mining operation. Cherokee warnings, Betty whispered when she saw them. Markers that said this place was wrong, had always been wrong, would always be wrong. The air tasted like copper and earth and something else, something organic. Our lights caught movement everywhere, shadows that fled from our combined illumination, but gathered thick in the spaces between. And the ringing had changed again, slower now, deeper. Each chime felt like it was coming from inside my chest, resonating with my heartbeat. We found Tommy Adkins 100 yards into level 6. He was standing in the center of a natural cavern, arms outstretched like he was conducting an invisible orchestra. His hospital gown hung in tatters, and his feet were bare, cut and bleeding from walking across the sharp rocks. But his face was the worst part. His eyes were open, but they weren't his eyes anymore. They'd been replaced with something that looked like black glass, reflective and empty. "Tommy," Wayne called out. "Son, can you hear me?" Tommy's head turned in our direction. His mouth opened, and the voice that came out was wrong. Multiple tones layered on top of each other, speaking in perfect synchronization. "You brought them all here. How generous. 23 voices for the choir. 23 bodies for the collector. The bell thanks you for your offering." "We're not offering anything," I said. "We're taking back what you stole." Tommy laughed, and the sound echoed through the cavern, bouncing off walls that seemed to pulse with the rhythm. "You think you can starve the bell? You think your small human connections can overcome hunger that has lasted millennia? We have fed on this valley since before your kind learned to walk upright. We will feed long after your bones turn to dust." Behind Tommy, the cavern wall split open. Not a crack or a collapse. It peeled back like skin, revealing a space that shouldn't exist. And in that space, suspended in darkness that seemed to have weight and texture, was the bell. It was massive, 10 feet tall at least, cast from metal that looked like iron but moved like liquid, constantly flowing and reforming. Faces pressed out from its surface, dozens of them, hundreds of them, all the people the mine had taken over the years. And hanging from the clapper, wrapped around it like a cocoon, was a human figure, the newest addition to the bell's collection. "Danny," Wayne breathed. "That's my boy." The bell rang once. The sound physically struck us, a wave of pressure that knocked several people to their knees. Jennifer clutched her daughter tighter, covering the child's ears. Betty gripped my arm hard enough to leave bruises. But we didn't break, didn't scatter, stayed together in our circle of light and human warmth. "Play the music," I said to Jennifer, "loud as it goes." She cranked the speaker to maximum volume. Country roads blasted through the cavern, competing with the bell's resonance. Other people started singing, shouting the lyrics, drowning out the ringing with human voices raised in defiance. The bell rang again, harder this time, trying to shatter our resolve. Cracks appeared in the cavern floor, spiderwebbing outward from where we stood. The collector emerged from the darkness behind the bell, that mass of bodies and bones we'd seen on level 4. But bigger now. So much bigger. It flowed toward us like a wave of screaming flesh. "We're not afraid of you," Margaret Parsons said. She stepped forward, breaking from our circle, walking toward the collector with her arms open. "You hear me? I'm not afraid, because my son is in there somewhere, and I remember him. I remember everything about him. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every time he told me he loved me. You can't erase that. You can't eat those memories. The collector reached for her with a dozen arms, fingers lengthening into claws. But where they touched her, they recoiled, smoking like they'd grabbed hot metal. Margaret kept walking, kept talking, kept pouring out her memories of her son like weapons against the darkness. Others followed. Wayne Runyon pushed past me, heading straight for the bell. "I'm coming, Danny. Hold on. Your old man's coming." Patty Lester went next, calling her brother's name. Then Billy Keene, looking for the parts of himself the mine had stolen. One by one, we advanced on the bell and the collector, not as individuals, but as a united force of love and memory, and stubborn human refusal to let go. The bell rang frantically now, a continuous peal that had no rhythm, no purpose except to make us stop, to make us afraid, to drive us apart. But we were singing over it, all of us. Country roads and Amazing Grace and children's songs and hymns and anything else we could think of, creating a wall of human sound that the bell couldn't penetrate. I reached the bell's surface and pressed my hands against it. The metal was freezing, burning cold that seared my palms, but I didn't pull away. Beneath the surface, I could feel movement. All those trapped faces pushing against their prison, trying to break free. "You fed on our despair," I shouted at the bell. "You fed on our loneliness and isolation. But we're not alone anymore. We're not isolated. We're here together, and we remember everyone you took. We remember their names and their faces and their laughter and their love. And you can't digest that. You can't feed on connection." Others joined me at the bell's surface, pressing their hands against it, calling out names of the lost. The metal began to crack under our touch, thin fractures spreading across its surface like ice breaking in spring. The collector surged forward, trying to protect the bell, but it was falling apart. Arms separated from the mass, bodies tumbling free, bones clattering to the cavern floor. And the faces, all those trapped aware faces, were changing. The terror fading from their features, replaced by something that looked like relief. Tommy Adkins collapsed, those black glass eyes shattering, real eyes emerging underneath. He was screaming, but it was his scream now, not the bell's voice using his mouth. Dale and Lloyd grabbed him, dragged him back toward our group, wrapping him in blankets someone had brought. The bell gave one final desperate ring, the loudest yet, powerful enough that blood ran from several people's noses. The cavern shook, rocks falling from the ceiling, but the sound was changing mid-ring, becoming higher, thinner, like metal straining past its breaking point. And then it cracked, a single fracture running from top to bottom, splitting the bell in two. The trapped figure inside, Danny Runyon, fell free. His father caught him, held him, sobbing as he felt his son's chest rise and fall with real breath. Around us, the collector was dissolving entirely, all those absorbed bodies crumbling to dust that smelled like old paper and autumn leaves. Peaceful dust, released dust. The faces in the bell's metal went still, and for a moment before they faded, I saw them smile. Grateful. Free. Finally allowed to rest. The cavern began to collapse, not violently, but deliberately, like the mine itself was giving up, letting go of its hunger and its hold on this place. We ran, all 23 of us, plus Tommy and Danny, stumbling through level 6 and up the shaft, through level 5 and level 4, past the still workers who were moving now, following us toward the surface, relearning how to be human. The mine groaned behind us, ancient timbers snapping, stone grinding against stone. But ahead was daylight. Beautiful, painful, overwhelming daylight. We burst out of the entrance and into the parking lot, collapsing on the gravel, breathing fresh air that tasted like freedom. Behind us, the mine entrance collapsed inward with a sound like thunder. Dust billowed out, coating our vehicles and clothes. When it cleared, the entrance was sealed completely, buried under tons of rock. And in the silence that followed, I realized what was missing. The bell. I couldn't hear it anymore. That constant background ringing that had been there since my first night in Harrow Creek was gone. The air felt lighter, cleaner. The dead trees on the ridge looked a little less dead. Betty stood beside me, tears running down her face, but she was smiling. It's over. After all these years, it's finally over. Dale helped Tommy to his feet. Lloyd lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, while Jennifer held his hand. Wayne supported his son, who was weak but alive, awake, remembering his own name. Margaret touched her boy's face with shaking hands, hardly believing he was real. All around us, people were reuniting with family members who'd been lost, holding tight to those who'd been freed from the collector's embrace. 23 of us had gone down. 43 came back up. The Bell's choir was silent at last. The company tried to sue us, just like they promised. Breach of contract, destruction of property, industrial sabotage. The lawsuits piled up like snowdrifts, threatening to bury us in legal fees and financial ruin. But then the state inspectors showed up, and what they found in the mine's records made the company's lawyers very quiet, very fast. 70 years of disappearances, documented and filed away. Insurance payouts for accidents that never happened. Quarterly reports that mentioned acceptable loss rates for human workers. Betty's husband's grandfather wasn't the only one who'd left evidence. Others had hidden letters, journals, photographs. Stories the company had tried to bury along with the bodies. The lawsuits disappeared. So did Harrow Creek Mining Corporation, dissolved overnight, assets liquidated. Nobody went to prison. Nobody ever does when corporations kill people slowly, carefully, with plausible deniability. But at least the mine stayed closed. At least no one else would be fed to the hunger in the dark. We meet on the third Saturday of every month. All of us. The ones who went down, and the ones who came back up. Betty hosts at the motel, which she's turning into something better than a way station for desperate people. A community center, maybe. A place where people can gather and remember they're not alone. Lloyd brings his daughter, who started drawing pictures of the mine. Her therapist says it's healthy, that she's processing the trauma through art. The stick figures she draws are always holding hands, always connected, always stronger together than apart. Wayne's son Danny is relearning how to be human. Some days are better than others. He still forgets things, still loses time, still wakes up with coal dust on his hands even though he hasn't been underground in months. But he's trying. His father helps him, patient and steady, refusing to let him feel alone in the recovery. Tommy Abkins doesn't come to the meetings. He's still at Sharp Hospital, still working through what happened to him. But he sends letters sometimes, rambling and disjointed, but getting clearer each time. Last month, he wrote that he's starting to remember who he was before the mine, starting to believe he can be that person again. I left Harrow Creek. Couldn't stay in that valley. Couldn't keep looking at Copperhead Ridge where the mine entrance used to be. But I come back for the meetings. Always will. Because sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in my apartment in Charleston, I hear it. Faint and distant, but unmistakable. The bell ringing from somewhere far away. The first time it happened, I called Dale in a panic. He admitted he heard it too. So did Lloyd, Betty, Margaret, and everyone else. The bell wasn't completely gone. Echoes remained, phantom sounds of something that had existed for so long it left marks on reality itself. But here's what we learned. When I hear the bell ring, I call someone from the group. Usually Betty, sometimes Dale or Lloyd. We talk until the ringing fades. Share stories, make plans for the next meeting. Remind each other that we're still here, still connected, still refusing to let the darkness isolate us. and the ringing always stops, always fades back into silence. Because that's the thing about hunger. It can't survive when it's met with connection instead of isolation, with hope instead of despair, with people who refuse to be alone in the dark. The mine is gone, the bell is broken, but we remain, not as victims, not as survivors, but as proof that sometimes, if you're brave enough and you have enough people beside you, you can walk into darkness and come back carrying light. We meet on the third Saturday of every month, and we always will, because we're never alone when we hear the ringing anymore, and together, we're stronger than any hunger in the dark.